We interrupt your regularly scheduled brainwashing with a dose of reality from CNS Dispatch. CNS. Citizens, not servants.
Hello, and welcome to Dispatch number 8 from CNS Dispatch, where here we are citizens, not servants. Here at CNS, our goal is to bring you common sense truth to counter the lies you've been fed from our government, big tech, and the global mainstream media. So today I'm doing something a little bit different. This is the first time for this one. I got a friend of mine who is in the real estate business, so I'm bringing him on to do an interview to discuss how he got started, what he does in the real estate business, and how he makes his money and how he got started and that kind of stuff. So for everybody, I'd like you to meet Mr. Jake Chambers. He does have a YouTube page called MillionHeir Mafia, as you can see below his picture here. So Jake, welcome. Hope you enjoy it. I'm not going to be too brutal on you. We're friends, of course. But so just for the audience, Jake and I met a couple, 4 or 5 years ago now, 6 years ago.
Yeah, at least 6.
Our children played sports together. He's got a whole Brady Bunch thing going on. I only have 2. But I coached his kids. They played on the same teams together. So I'm going to let him do a brief introduction to himself, give you guys a little bit of background. So Jake, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Preston. Hey, guys. So my name is Jake Chambers. Like you said, I recently separated from the Marine Corps as a captain after just under 15 years. I did a couple combat tours. I was a helicopter attack pilot, flew AH-1 Whiskies, did a couple Afghanistan tours, and had a lot of fun doing that. And then the way Preston and I actually got connected was because I was stationed here. We were both stationed here, but I was at flight school teaching new guys how to fly helicopters, and our kids are both similar ages, and they both love soccer. So we kind of co-coached a couple years together, and so that's kind of how that happened. As I got near the end of my career, I had every intention of doing the 20 years and all that kind of stuff, and getting the full retirement. And after about 10 years, I was basically told, "Hey, you're not going to be a Marine forever, so figure something out." So basically started buying real estate, not knowing at all what I was doing, and slowly built up a small portfolio. And things rapidly picked up. COVID was a thing, and so a lot of people were struggling, and my business blew up. But it was because of steps that I had taken to position myself to take advantage and strike while the iron is hot. So Warren Buffett said it best: be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy. And when everybody was fearful, I was very, very greedy in a business sense. So was able to get a decent amount of properties in our portfolio, and then make some really, really good partnerships with some great guys. And that's essentially where I'm at now. I'm with partner with a couple guys that are all helicopter pilots. A couple of them are actually still reservists. And there's a company called Climb Capital, and we are a capital company, and we buy multi-million-dollar assets, and that's what we do. So
I remember when I was coaching, I think your daughter was on my actual team.
Mm-hmm.
You had already started looking at or working on the transition out of the military, because it was questionable whether you're going to be able to stay or not. But I remember when you bought your first house. I'm assuming it was was that just a traditional type buy, if you will, where it wasn't through like a brokerage or whatever, just a typical home buy you guys fixed up? Because I remember your wife and kids having to help clean everything up. And so that was just a regular purchase. That was just your first foray into this world, right?
Yeah. That one was about as run of the mill as you could have got back then. Now finding is what we found it on the market on the MLS. It was it was called an REO, real estate owned, so owned by a bank. This was late 2016 when we found it, and then we closed in the beginning of 2017. But back then you could still find some decent deals if you knew what you were doing. We found a decent deal. I just didn't know what I was doing. So I actually used YouTube pretty much I could work hard, but I'm not technically skilled. I can fly helicopters and break them, but I can't fix them, right? So we just used YouTube and learn how to, did painted, laid floors, fixed plumbing, electrical. I did have some help from my dad, who came out for a few weeks. He's now down here, but they lived up in Illinois at the time. And And so it was good. And we did what's called a BRRRR. It's a pretty common term now. Back a few years ago, it wasn't. It's buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and then repeat. And then that repeat part was what allowed me to get into the bigger stuff about 7 8 months later. So but yeah,
So-
that first one was the house.
But you bought it. You bought the house. I'm gonna say under your own name. It wasn't under like a company. You hadn't incorporated or anything by that time, right?
Still hold it under my own name. I still have it
Really?
6 years 5 6 years later. Yeah.
So
Yep.
and then you bought. I wonder if I remember right. You bought a couple of more regular houses, and then obviously I moved, and we kind of parted ways a little bit because of life being what it is.
Yeah.
But how did you transition from just a Joe Schmuck buying a house, fixing it up, and becoming a slumlord and renting it out to people, to becoming incorporated under an LLC, an investment firm, et cetera? Can you explain how that transition took place?
Yeah, and I mean, it was honestly just like a lot of. It wasn't super crazy in the way the progression. It was just lack of knowledge is why I bought it in my own name, right? The reason it's still there is because it's a one-off, and there's very little risk to me owning it in my own name. If I had 30 40 properties in my own name, then that would be dumb, because there's a lot of equity that somebody could sue me on and get it. But this one just doesn't have that much that I have to worry about. But to answer your question is, it's just reading. I love to read. I probably read between 60 and 75 books a year, not to mention just articles and podcasts and YouTube, videos, and just doing. Obviously, doing the do is one of the best ways to learn. It can be one of the more stressful and frustrating, but it is the best, teacher. You just can't get everything out of a book. But back to relationships is I was still a pilot. I was still, so I had a bunch of leave saved up from all of my deployments. And so I took a month off. I was thankfully at a non-deploying billet. And so I was able to take a month off and go flip that house. It took a couple months, but I was able to do it on weekends and nights afterwards. But I knew some pilots, and we actually, just me and another guy that I knew from fishing, who's now the guy I work with Climb Capital. And he was a couple years ahead of me, had been doing it a couple years, and he had started investing in mobile home parks. And so he had and this is kind of how I pivoted into the commercial / multifamily sphere, is he had a small 17 unit, and it was a dump. And we still own it, and it's better. It was a turd though, and it's now essentially a polished turd, but it's in a great spot. They just built a brand new Love's right next to it with a Arby's, and there's a bunch of stuff going on at the storage facility. They just got bought out from an institutional investor. So there's a lot of stuff going on right there, which is good. But he's like, hey, you want to buy, this mobile home park? And I was like, mobile home park? I don't want to deal with that.
Right.
And then he showed me the financials on it, the projections. And I was like, yeah, I want to invest in mobile home parks. And so at the time, you could still get some decent deals on mobile home parks. And then in the next year, we bought 3 more. So
when you say mobile homes, are you? Because I know you recently purchased a like an RV park. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking mobile homes, you're talking straight up trailers. Like I'm not going to say the derogatory stuff, but just straight up regular mobile homes.
Yeah, exactly. So a manufactured home is what we call them.
So how did you get it? Obviously, it takes money. So when you're buying a mobile home, you're buying an investment, because whoever owned it before you is probably purchased it the way you did as an investment kind of thing. So you're buying someone else's investment from them, because they're getting money from the rent or the leases or whatever the exact. I know they come a little bit different on mobile home parks, but so you transition from buying a house, fixing it up, and renting it, which is a residual / passive kind of income.
Yeah, passive
basically.
Income.
So then you got hooked up with your buddy. I'm assuming at some point you became like an LLC. You became your own business, or part of a business anyway.
Yep.
And then how did you guys? So as an example, you're the first mobile home park that you went in on. What kind of money are we talking about? That the cost of purchasing that property, that income generating property. Yeah. What kind of money are we talking about? And how do you go about getting that kind of capital?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and every deal is different. I'll lead with that. It depends, because you always need money but you don't necessarily need yours. And like the big word or phrase in real estate investing is the best do it using OPM or other people's money, right? That's the kind of the buzzword. But in this particular instance, so because I didn't really have experience in mobile home parks, I and one other guy brought the money. My buddy Bob brought the deal and structured it, found the deal, negotiated, got the price locked in, structured the deal, talked with the bank, got all that stuff lined up. And in exchange for his time, effort, and then signing on the loan, we brought the money and we broke up the equity based off of that. So I own just under 40% of that deal based off the money that I brought. The purchase price was $140,000, 145 for 17 units. Yeah, not bad, but it needed a lot of work because that was the upfront cost. And so we were able to buy that with, we were able to get a loan for, I think, just over 100K, which was a little bit short. So we actually got a second loan that was subordinate to that one from the seller. So we basically had two loans. We had a first position and then the second position. The seller was second. So if we defaulted, the bank got paid first and then the seller did. And that's how we did it. We had like a 6-month balloon. It was just a short-term note so that we could get in, take the cash, because we knew this thing had some issues. It had to have some homes moved. It had to have some homes demoed. And then we had to bring, do some setting and some kind of prep work and stuff like that. And it was really underutilized. The lady who owned it had built it back in the 60s, 70s, and just, bad, typical, they were the trailer park trash people that started it, and they ran their park like that. So that's what it was. And so we just fixed it up. We've converted it. We actually now have 21 spaces in there, and we rezoned it to actually be, we had to go through a whole rezoning process through the zoning board and get a variance to zone it as P2, which allows us to have RVs in there.
Okay.
So we can put RVs in there, and we can put a lot more in the same amount of space. So we have 21 in there. We've got, I think we have 2 vacancies right now. But just people kind of, periodically, it's easier to move a RV out. So we have people move in and out periodically.
So what kind of, so that investment upfront cost was 140K.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you probably had easily another $100,000 worth of upgrades, fixing, repair. I'm just picking a round number.
Yeah.
So what kind of a return on investment, or how long did it take you to actually see a return on that investment? Because I'm assuming, you're talking a short-term loan, so there's a lot of money needs to get paid back quick. Mm-hmm. Plus, you had to outlay the money for the rezoning and the repairs and that kind of thing. How long did it take you to actually realize a return on your investment?
Yeah, so we kind of did the same thing with the mobile home park as I did with my first rental. Is we got it, we put a lot of money into it, fixing it up, and then we put new tenants in there, better class of tenants, a higher rent, higher occupancy. And we went to the banks. Like I said, we bought it at 140. I think we put in 85K, but like you said, around, with let's say the bank is, the closing costs, we add that in. So we're about 240 all in, and we refinanced it for 400,000 about 18 months later. So,
really?
Yeah. So we were able to pull out not only our original investment, pay off the first note, pay off the seller, and then we also walked away with, I think I walked away with 55K, just in my pocket. And the nice thing about a refinance is, while you do have to pay the loan back, it's a loan, so it's tax free. So that money, that 55 grand went in my pocket, and I used it to buy a couple more rental properties, leverage into those, fix those up, and then got cash flow. So
when you said you refinanced, okay, that doesn't have the same connotation as selling it. Or when you're saying you refinanced it, so I'm assuming to relate it in my head, like
the loan,
like a home equity line of credit kind of deal based off the equity in the property.
Well, it's not a line of credit, but it's so basically, if you have, let's say you have a house that is worth 400,000, but you only owe 100,000 on the loan, whether you paid it down or whether it just appreciated that much or whatever, you can get up to whatever the bank will allow. But in this case, 75% of the value. So in this case, $300,000 they will give you as a loan. We had to pay off your original note, right, which is 100. So you're left with $200,000 because they gave you 300, you get to pay off 100,000. That gets paid off at closing. I'm taking out closing costs, so there's some variable costs and there's some little ones, but other than that, you get 200,000 in your pocket, and the property is worth 400. So the bank still has 25% equity, meaning if you default, it's still worth more than you owe, at least in theory, like based off the appraisal and stuff like that. So the bank is happy. You're paying them a mortgage payment every month. They're happy about that. And then you can take that money and then put that into something else. And
hence the OPM part.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of people don't realize, and I tell people all the time, is people talk, and it's like, lawyers, people make fun of them. It's just Navy makes fun of Marines and Army and all that stuff. Like we jab, but at the end of the day, people don't realize the bank is your best and biggest investor. I mean, they typically bring between 75 to 80 or 90% of the money to the deal. Like, how are they not? You got to treat them right? So, I mean, I know the bank presidents and the vice presidents by name. We drink whiskey together, right? So like that's the kind of relationship. And I'm not just going to say you're going to have that relationship with all of them, but you need to build a relationship, because like we just bought a plane and I got it financed by 100%. I mean, their policy is no more than 80%, but because I know him, he's like, yeah, we'll do 100%. Okay. So I don't have to put anything down. I bought an airplane for nothing down, and you know what I mean? So
from in 2016, when you purchased your first foray into this whole world, you bought a house, you still own it, right? So I'm assuming you make $200-$400 a month off that rent between what you owe on the house to pay off your loan. So you're putting $200-$400 a month in your pocket. I'm roughly guessing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from there, roughly 6 years ago, from that one singular property in 6 years, what kind of property do you own? If own's not the right word, correct me, but what kind of property?
We call it assets under management.
Property management kind of.
So what I do is I find deals, and we're talking on the bigger side. For the single family stuff, it's just kind of like there's not enough meat on the bones to have multiple people involved unless you're buying a lot of them. If you're buying like 10, 20, 30 single families, you can kind of consider them like a multifamily property. But if I make $500-$600 a month off of one rental property, that's pretty good. But you start splitting it up with three people, it's not really worth your time, right? Because you still got, you know what I mean? It's just so the single family is okay. Now, when you get in these bigger properties, you're going to make less per unit, but you have so many of them that volume more than makes up for it, right? And there's other tax benefits and stuff, but yeah. So I am a part of a little over 500 units right now. So I own about 17 of my own, and then I have a storage facility, and I have 3 mobile home parks and a couple mobile RV parks, and a couple apartment complexes that I either own or that I control, or that I'm one of what's called a general partner, or the sponsor, meaning I found the deal, me and my partner or partners found the deal, structured it, got the bank, did all the underwriting, got the loans, raised capital using what's called a syndication. And think of it like an IPO that a company does in the stock market. It's the same thing, just a private one. It's called a PPM, a private placement memorandum, and it's basically says, hey, I got this company which is going to own this asset, and here's the numbers. We have this big presentation. It's got all the numbers and financials and the prospectus, or we call it a pro forma, of what this thing is going to do. And are you interested in investing, yes or no? And they say yes, and we hire an SEC attorney to keep us in compliance with the SEC regulations, and then he sends out a subscription agreement, and they say, yep, I want to send this much. And then so my job is typically investor relations, meaning I'm kind of dealing with the investors.
You're the schmoozer.
I'm the schmoozer, but I'm also the one paying the paycheck, so they like me the most. So,
so when you do, so now you're talking, you and 2 other people are your primary partners, right? So not only do you guys have to pay the loan / mortgage every month, or however it's structured, quarterly, I'm assuming, mostly because you're talking corporate investments.
The investors get paid typically quarterly is
so you got to take that, what you owe, what you make, the difference gets divided obviously amongst you three, but you also have to pay dividends back to the investor, the people that are buying stock. I know I'm being facetious, but so you have to split the money up. So you're talking, so if someone were to invest in your company and give you $100, I'm being very basic with numbers. I'm assuming they probably have to give a lot more than that based upon whatever's going on.
Got a couple zeros there, and
right
there.
So what kind of from the people that invest in you, what kind of typical? I mean, I know it all fluctuates and varies based on the property market.
I know what you're asking.
What kind of return on investment are they looking at?
Right, and so let me back up a second. So you mentioned we get paid and we have to pay investors. It's the other way around. So I get paid last. So taxman gets paid first. Like Sam always gets paid first.
Right.
Then the bank.
Right.
Then any contractors or vendors, and then our investors. And if there's anything left over, we get that. And the way we supplement or we make up for us not really usually cash flowing, me and the partners personally, is at the end, because we hold a certain amount of equity in the deal, we'll typically get paid at the end. So all the investors get paid back. And then at the end, or if we refinance during the middle of the hold period, we call it the hold. So say we're going to own it for 10 years. Typically after 2 or 3 years, we want to refinance all of their money out and pay them all. They basically get all their original investment. So if they put $100,000 in, they'll have that $100,000 back from the refi, but they'll keep their ownership. So now they essentially have what people call an infinite return. There was obviously a time value of money for the time they had that 100K invested, but now they got it all back. They can use it for whatever they want. It's all tax free because it was their money to begin with. They already paid taxes before they put it in. Now every profit they make since then is taxable, but they have no risk and no liability, which is why they're called a limited partner, an LP, right? Because the only risk that they have is the money they invested. I take all the risks, sign in for the note, any type of legal stuff. Somebody falls and hurts themselves or sues me for whatever reason, they are not involved whatsoever. And we structure it that way. But typically the returns, we shoot for a minimum of a 15%, what's called IRR, meaning internal rate of return. So that's kind of like our bare bones. We're not going to even go under contract. Ideally, we're looking for like 25 plus on the IRR. So and what that means,
each investor is it could hopefully get, if I'm giving you $100,000, I'm going to get 125 grand back at some moment in time or in the future.
Every year. Well, so IRR means essentially the average. So, and the reason they call it IRR is because it's average. So typically, because when we buy a property, if it's a good deal, it's usually undermanaged, it's poor condition. So there's usually not a whole lot of cash flow up front, right? So let's say year one is an 8% return, but then year two is a 18%, and then year three is a 25%, and year four is a 40%, and year five is a 60%. And that 60% or 75 or 80% might be because in that year five, we sold the deal. And so there's appreciation, plus we paid down the principal over the X amount of years. So there's that delta keeps getting bigger and bigger. And then when we sell, that chunk gets dispersed. And so that factors into it. But so the average, so if you held it for, let's say it was a 20% IRR. If you held it for 5 years, that means that those investors doubled their money in that 5-year period. They got an average of 20% a year.
Right.
And really I say that it's actually better than that, because if you make 20% and you make 20% on that the next year, that's obviously going to double in like 4 years or 3.5 years.
How is the current market? Okay. So I just recently moved basically across the country from one side to the other, and the place I moved to here in Colorado, it was already crazy expensive when it comes to housing and property, land. And it's only gotten worse. And me and the wife steadily look at different places because ideally we want to get back towards the Midwest because of family and stuff. So just in a regular residential market, trying to find a reasonable deal, meaning the house doesn't need complete, restructure and new drywall and maybe a little bit of paint's okay, but maybe having more than just a standard, 1/60th of an acre neighborhood kind of plot. Even in people would think that, oh, just go to Mississippi or Arkansas or, some place with cost of living is lower. You can't find a reasonable house, if you will. This standard 4-bedroom, 2-bath, let's just say 2,000 square foot house on a regular neighborhood kind of property size lot. You can rarely find them now for less than $200,000, even in Mississippi, Alabama, Missouri, rural Tennessee, rural Kentucky. How is this market, with the way everything's going with real estate property, how much of an impact it had on your guys' business?
Well, and you got to put it in perspective too. The federal government printed how many trillions of dollars in the last few years. You take the Monopoly game and then you open up a brand new Monopoly box and throw all that cash into it, everything automatically costs double, right? Because you have twice as much money chasing the same amount of product. So you got to take into that inflation into the factor, but you also have to take in, due to a lot of policies that are in place, there is a mass exodus from blue states to red states.
Oh, yeah.
I happen to live and invest heavily in red states. Guess where everybody's going? Guess where the demand is? Well, in the states that I buy real estate. Mm-hmm. That's part of it. So the demand is remaining high. And also back, all the way back in the 2007-8 timeframe, when we had the Great Recession from the housing market crash, during that 10-year, 12-year period, and about 10-year period from 2008 to 2018, there was over a 4 million home gap, meaning they didn't build. They're 4 million homes short of building. So we're having to catch up.
Right.
And even with the massive amount so you have massive demand, you have massive housing shortage, you have massive exodus, and you have a massive amount of money that's just getting dumped into the system. And combine that with interest rates, while they're rising, I don't see it going to rise more than 1% total this year, and I even think it might go back down as we get later on in the year. But the rates are retarded low, so it's very easy, buying a house of $300,000-$400,000 house at 3% interest is the same thing as buying a $200,000 house at 7-8% that it was a while ago, right? Not in last few years, but a little while ago. So it's very comparable. So how that affects me is it's difficult because there is a lot more money, and the other thing is that there's a lot of what we call institutional investors, so the hedge funds and these big multi-billion-dollar funds.
The BlackRock guys.
The BlackRock, I mean, they're buying a lot of stuff, and I honestly don't know everything that they do. I know there's probably a lot of shady stuff, but I honestly am ignorant on a lot of that. I don't doubt it at all, but I just don't know, so I don't want to speak, unintelligently. But there's just a lot of Wall Street money that's moving into these areas, and they don't need to make the margins that we do to make it make sense for their investors, because their investors are good with 6%. Mine aren't good with 6%.
Right.
I'm not good with 6. I'm not going to invest. I'm also a limited partner. I invest in other people's deals as a limited partner. Now, sometimes I happen to be on both sides, and typically the way I am, our kind of mindset is, and I think we get this from the military side, is put your money where your mouth is, right? Like you shouldn't be prepared. You shouldn't have ask somebody else to do something that you're not willing to do yourself, right?
Right.
I mean, that's officership / senior enlisted, ship up and down the ladder. That's just the way we operate. I would never ask. Now, I can't always. Sometimes I'm a little short on what I can put in, and I'm like, I wish I had more. But I would always be willing to invest in my deals, which I think goes a long way with my investors. But that is how that's affecting the business. I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but I get excited about this if you can't tell. What it's actually caused us to do is there's always typically a lag in what the big investors, those institutional investors, are investing into what is kind of the up and coming thing, right? So apartment complexes are they're just oversaturated. Everybody's buying apartment complexes. And that's where a lot of these guys are. They're buying at, 5 caps, 4 caps. And that's actually almost like a negative inverse return. They're 100% playing on the appreciation plan. And it's all pro forma or prospectus or hopeful, basically what we call hopes and prayers, right?
Right.
So they're hoping that things appreciate to make it worth the money down the road. So, and then mobile home parks and even self-storage are getting just a big influx. Like mobile home parks are really hard to find a good deal. So we've actually, and that's, you mentioned it, we bought a couple of RV parks. I say a couple, we've got 4 more that are getting ready to close here in the next month. And plus we bought about, 5 or 6 last year. So we have moved into RV parks for a couple of reasons. One, it's places that we want to go. Like I would go and,
right.
Like I would go and I would take my RV and I would stay with my family and have a good time and, go and hang out. It's relaxing. Which means other people want to do it too. A lot of these are still owned. We call it fractional, or it's fractionalized, or what do you call it? It basically means it doesn't have a lot of institutional investors yet. And so it's a lot of mom and pop owners. They've owned it for 40, 50 years, and they're just ready to get out, or they've undermanaged it or whatever, or they're friends with everybody in the park and they don't want to raise rents. Well, we'll come in there and we'll get it cleaned up and expand it. You can, like I said earlier, you could put a lot more RVs in one spot than you can mobile homes. And even if you could find mobile homes, which a lot of these companies, these manufacturers are up to 2 years or more behind. So like if you want a mobile home right now, you're going to wait 2 years just to get it. Even then they're $65,000, $70,000. Not that RVs are cheap, but you can get a relatively cheap one and put 4 of them in the same place that you can put one mobile home.
So you're doing, I'm going to say a twofold type. I know you have your other little side projects that you do, but so you don't just buy, fix, and flip, although that is part of what you do. Maybe not as, within 3 months of buying, you're not looking at fixing it up and selling it 3 months later. You're looking at it, fixing it up and selling it 5 years later, but you're also maintaining or keeping certain properties that are the passive income, whether it's just your very first house that you still own. But you're doing both. You're buying, fixing, flipping, as well as buying, fixing, renting for the passive income. So you're playing both sides of this, right? Or you're doing both channels, if you will.
Yeah. And that's actually why. So we've kind of slowed down, but a little bit, or significantly. We're still flipping a couple, but I partnered with another guy and bought into a wholesaling company, which is essentially flipping paper. I mean, you get the property under contract and you assign your rights to that contract to another buyer. And sometimes we keep the deals and we flip them ourselves. And the reason for that is, now he has a multi-million-dollar software company. He was a Air Force guy, he has this company called REISIP, which if you haven't checked it out, it's awesome. We used it. This is the program. He does tons and tons of stuff. The guy he burns the candle at all 10 ends. Like the guy he's like an Energizer bunny. So, but Tyler and I, we had this company and we would, flip these properties to get a bunch of cash, and then we would go buy properties to hold. And so we have several properties, and to include our office that has 7 rentals as well. And so we can work out of the office and then have the passive income coming in that's out in Fort Walton. And so we use that quick cash, which does have a higher taxable gain, right? Because it's short term versus long term. But when we use that money to buy long-term assets, or these bigger assets, these commercial assets, we can use depreciation. And thanks to President Trump and the tax act or whatever it was back in 2018, that's effective through 2026. I think in 24 it starts to kind of ramp back if they don't change it, and then fully phases out in 26. We can accelerate the depreciation on those assets, so we can actually get a massive taxable write-off against gains. So while we have a lot of active income, we can write it all out and wipe it all out.
So the paper thing is kind of like I'm going to say, like, you guys basically got like a finder's fee, if it makes sense. So you went out and found this $100,000 or this house for, I'm saying being very literal, but a house for $100,000. You found it, secured it, found a buyer for $115,000, and you guys made that $15,000 profit. This is more or less a finder's fee, right?
Yeah. I mean, we call it an assignment fee, but it's the same. Yeah, it depends on the state you're in. It's called an assignment fee. yeah, I mean, and it's still a deal for the buyer. They're going to go fix it up. Like the house is maybe worth 250,000. They got to put 50 into it. I didn't want to do the work. I don't have the time, the resources.
Right.
They're going to make 50, 60,000. I make a quick 15, but I also don't have any money into it. So,
Right.
you know, we both win. So, you know, if they have the ability to raise the money and the time and the crew, I mean, you know, they're going to make more money in the long run. But I can do it quicker and get in and out and then go on to the next deal. So it's what are you looking for, right?
Yeah, and this is what you do. So just for a perspective for some people, you got out of the Marine Corps. You started the buying and not flipping, but buying, flipping, and buying and fixing and renting before you actually transitioned out of the military. When you transitioned out of the military, you didn't get you didn't retire out. You basically got out. I'm assuming, just as a guess, you're not doing the disability thing through the military, or you're not getting paid for it.
Well, yes and no. So I got severance pay because I was separated, but I have to pay it back. So I won't get any disability for 7 years.
Right. So so basically, when you transitioned out, you didn't go right into you didn't find your typical 9-to-5 job or anything along those lines. You just ramped up what you had already started. So and this is just for the audience, it's 4 kids. 13, 11, and 9 or 10 now, right? For the twins?
Twins are 8, yeah.
8.
Yeah, almost 9.
Your wife stays at home. Well, okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Your wife has a full-time job being a mom and other stuff, but she doesn't have a 9-to-5 job. So your sustenance, not only for your family, is what you're doing now, but that's it. That's what you've hung your hat on. Yep. You've been out for 2 years, 3 years. How long have you been out now?
10 months.
Oh, okay. You just I thought you had gotten out a while ago.
No, I got out in July. So yeah, I did the continuation. The Marine Corps had an option where I could stay for an extra couple of years. So that I was executing that right about when you moved. So maybe a little bit after, but yeah. So I've been out since July 1st of last year, 21. So
okay. So for people that are, what would be, let's just say your advice. People understand the traditional real estate business. You buy, you fix, you flip. You buy low, sell high, right? Standard, just about in your business. So if somebody were to want to get into this type of business, what would be, aside from don't do it, what would be your advice? There's risk in any business venture. I don't think people there's the whole risk adverse thing when it comes to even the stock market, right? What's the
I'd call that more risky than anything because you're giving your money to somebody you don't even know to do what a monkey can do better statistically.
So what'd be your advice for people to get into this kind of business, understanding there is risk involved, understanding it's just like any other business, but what would be like a starting point, and what do people need to know? Hold on, before you answer that, what kind of speed bumps, detours have you experienced doing what you're doing? I mean, I'm sure you've learned from everything, because that's one of the ways we all learn, right? What are a couple of the big potholes, if you will, that you ran into doing what you're doing?
Yeah, and we talked before we start this a little bit about, the best way to learn is to do it, right? And at the end of the day, just remember this: you are going to pay for your education, whether you do it in a classroom or whether you do it in life. I decided to do it through life, and I made some, painful, both, emotionally and stressful, as well as painful in my pocketbook expenses. So I think, and I'll generalize the biggest pitfalls. I think the biggest one ultimately is going to be is up here, right? You eventually just have to jump in, right? You have to get in. I'm not saying you have to invest in real estate. Some people don't want to do it. It's fine. But if you're going to do it, we call it analysis paralysis. Like you think you can always think of what could go wrong. And in the military, we talk about the 80% solution executed violently is much more effective than 100% solution never executed, right? So, or executed timidly, right? So execute and do it violently and go all in and do it, and then you'll just figure it out. But the typical ones are going to be, and especially now, is going to be manpower, and material, and just kind of underestimating the cost, the true cost. And there's a great book that I have, and actually one of my first videos, it's probably not that good. I haven't watched it in a while, but that I did is like my top 10 favorite books, and one of them was like, it was like my Bible. I got it tabbed out, I got highlighted and stuff, and it's called Weekend Millionaires: Secrets to Investing in Real Estate, and it talks about how to figure out and calculate all the numbers. And so that was the big thing. Thankfully, I read that early, and so I was able to be like, okay, it's not. A lot of people think, okay, my mortgage is $1,000 a month, my rent is $1,500 a month, I'm going to make $500 a month in income. And you're like, no, you're not, because people don't think that some mortgages have insurance and taxes built into it. Some don't, especially in commercial. A lot of times they don't escrow property management, call it 10%. Eventually you're going to have to replace your roof, replace your HVAC, replace, the plumbing. So you have to put a little bit aside for that. While you're not spending it today, it's already spent 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road.
Right.
The roof, stuff like that. So you got to anticipate that. Plus, there's just maintenance and repair things that happen throughout the year that you gotta pay for. If anybody's owned real estate, whether it's just their own house or not, insurance is going up, especially in the state of Florida with all the hurricanes and everything. It's going up. Taxes keep going up. It's great that everything's appreciating, but the tax assessor knows that too. He's not idiot, so he taxes the taxes up. And so you got that $1,000 mortgage that turns goes from a $500 profit to a $50 profit real quick. So that's what a lot of people don't anticipate. The other thing is, unfortunately, I hate to say it, you're going to get screwed by a contractor. Some, you know what I mean? It might be a GC, the general contractor. It might be the individual guys, the electrician, the plumber, whatever. And even if it's not, he stole a bunch of money from you, or he did a terrible job, they just don't show up and they leave you in a lurch. That's very common now, especially with all these developments going on. It's a lot easier and it's a lot less work for them to just go into a studded out house, rough everything in, and get paid as much or more than to come in and kind of jerry rig your old house that they got to be careful with walls and other stuff. So, I mean, it's just, it makes sense, but that is probably the big thing. And then relationships. That might have been the most frustrating thing for me. I kind of anticipated some of the other stuff, but I would say give everything you do 18 months within reason, right? If you're going to try something, give it 18 months. And the reason I say this, I don't know where I saw it. I don't know if it was a podcast, if it was a YouTube thing, if I read it in a book or on a blog, but somebody had said, give it 18 months of building relationships, talking to every realtor, every, broker, every banker, every, insurance agent, everybody, and telling them, I invest in even if you don't even have any real estate, I'm a real estate investor. I buy, off market properties, or I buy, properties in rough condition. I fix them up. I put tenants in there and refinance them out, whatever. Just tell everybody that you do that. And it's not that you're lying. You do that. You just haven't done it yet, maybe. But even if you have one, that's what you do now. If you're a banker from 9 to 5, you're not a banker anymore. You are a real estate investor. I was a Marine for 4. I'm always a Marine, right? But I still had 4 more years of my Marine Corps career left, and I was a real estate investor. Every time I went to an event, my Marine, background, my background as a military officer was just basically kind of street cred for my my ethics and my morals and my work ethic and stuff like that. It wasn't like, hey, I fly Cobras for the Marine Corps, and I also invest in real estate. No, it was, I invest in real estate, and then I sometimes fly helicopters, type of thing afterwards.
Right. And
then that just kind of goes to your credibility. So that was some of my biggest pitfalls, and just getting banks, because of those relationships, it took, it was 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months. And I'm like, I'm not getting anything back from these leads, these relationships. I'm going to all the events. I would go to, they call them RIAs, Real Estate Investment Association. So ours meets once a month on the second Tuesday of every month. With a bunch of guys, and we go in and we all kind of do the same thing, but there's some brokers, there's some investors, there's some, apartment syndicators, there's some single family rental guys, there's some flippers, wholesalers, all that kind of stuff. And we all get together and we kind of talk about some of the things that are going on. We have briefs, and then we have a network, we got a Facebook page, all that kind of stuff. So, which is great. But after about 18 months, and after I had bought a couple properties, I call the bank and they're like, yeah, we can do that. And I was like, dude, last week you told me it isn't going to happen. I was like, well, that was 17 months and, 3 weeks ago. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was like at 18 months and really hit the second gear at 2 years. That was when it's like, holy crap. Everything, just the doors open up. And so, but it was tough for a couple of years.
So real estate. So my wife had her real estate license forever. She worked in property management. She wasn't ever actually like a seller agent, but she did property management. But one thing I've always known about real estate, I'm saying traditional real estate business, think brokerage, agent, seller, buyer's agent. From a seller's perspective in real estate, it takes you 6 months to actually start making a living as a real estate agent, whether you're working for Century 21 or whomever, right? Mm-hmm. So I know the market is a little funky right now because houses are selling, 2 hours after they get put on the market. But that means from the seller's or from a real estate agent broker's perspective, they have very low inventory. They don't have a stock of houses to sell to show. But in general, 6 months is about the rule of thumb for when you first venture into real estate, selling real estate for, Century 21, Remax, or whomever, mm-hmm. to where you start actually getting an income, because selling property takes time, getting all the paperwork and all the other stuff. In your world, if somebody were to step out into what you do and try to do what you do, what's a realistic, and again, we know there's one-offs. We know that there's sometimes things happen right and sometimes things happen wrong. But if you're talking about somebody just stepping into the foray, getting into your world, is it again a 6 months before you can realize a not just making a little bit of money? I'm talking income, something that can sustain yourself. How long did it take you to get to the point where you were able to? I mean, I know during the time you were active duty, you had your active duty income in addition, but realization of, I started here, it's now been X amount of time where I'm getting by, I'm making do, I'm making money, I'm paying my bills, I'm keeping my light on. What kind of time frame can people?
Yeah, we call that financially free. Right? When you hit your financial freedom number, right? Which is the way it's kind of defined. Doesn't mean you stop there, but it's when your expenses are paid for by your passive income. And passive income is a pretty loose word, because you're still, right, unless you're just giving somebody money, like what I do, if you invest in my deals and you're that passive guy, just gets that mailbox money, that's about the only way you're going to really be passive, because everything else there's work, or you got to talk to somebody. But so to answer your question, I hit my, and once we hit it, it's a very much a hockey stick, right? So you got to remember that. Like that 18-month thing I told you about, mm-hmm. it's kind of slow, and then you hit this point, and it could be 3 months, it could be 3 years. You don't know where that's going to be. It's really hard to tell, and it depends on a couple things. But I would say you're looking at a couple years to where you know enough and you've experienced enough to where you can just kind of do it, right? But like you mentioned, like I have my military income. A lot of people are so quick and so fast. I hate my job. I want to get on my job. I want to quit this thing. Tell the boss to go shove it. All this, Johnny Paycheck stuff, right? Like it doesn't, like nothing is more effective at building your side hustle and then subsequently exiting the rat race and getting into your own business than your income, than your W-2. I mean, not only for just the money. Because, let's say you make $100K a year, just to make a nice round number, and your expenses are $50K a year. That means you have $50,000 a year that, well, you don't want to lose it. If you lost it, it doesn't really affect your life, right? Like you're good. So it's a lot easier to invest that than I have $100,000 in my bank. I have no job. If I lose that 50, I can't get it back. I can't replace that with my job, right? Also, that W-2 is very useful for getting loans, because unfortunately, like, I go to a bank, and I'm not bragging here, but I have millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars of under asset, not like in my bank account, but like there's debt on there. So it's not like I own, mm-hmm. I'm worth, all these millions, but like I have a lot of loans. I'm very experienced, and I have I'm a lot more knowledgeable than the average bear. But some guy who makes $50,000 can go and get a better loan on their house than I can right now through the conventional way, right? I have to go to like a commercial bank and do some crazy underwriting, and the underwriting, like me getting a loan is a month process because of all the paperwork I have to put in, because I'm complicated, right? Because I have so many entities and things like that, and that's just the nature of the beast, and that's fine. But that W-2 helps you get those loans. Like I never would have got that first deal if I didn't have a job.
Right.
I had a job, and I was able to just, oh yeah, we'll give you, 80%. They gave me 80%. And so I only had to bring, it was a purchase price was $65,000. And so I had to bring like $15,000 to close. If you can't find $15,000 to invest, like you're not, it's not your time, right?
Right.
It's just not enough. You have to have you have to get your budget. You have to get your financial house in order. I'm not saying you have to pay off all your debt, all this kind of stuff. I'm just saying you have to have enough to where you can afford to lose that money, and that mentality that, okay, I don't want to lose it, but if I do, I'm not going to die, right? So you got to be.
Or you can wait. That. You can go without that money for a year before you get it paid back to you or whatever.
Right, and to again, it's like you said, it's kind of a hard question to answer. But for me, I hit my financial freedom number last January, so January 21, which was, 4 years. I just passed the 5-year point, about 4 years in. Now, the reason it took a little longer was also because I literally dumped every red cent of profit that I had or extra money and from my W-2, and every cent I made, I never took a distribution. No money ever came, like it technically came to me, but then it went right back out. It was just a revolving door. It comes in, it goes back out, it gets re-leveraged into something bigger. I refinance it, and it comes back in, it just gets re-leveraged into something bigger, and it just kept going. And that was what allowed me to do that. But there's no way I would have been able to do that without a job, a W-2. And then that passive income from the W-2 or from the wholesaling, those quick chunks were what allowed me to just dump it in and buy it right away. But if if that's what you have and you're a wholesaler or whatever, you can take that, live off of some of it, take the rest, put it aside, and then go buy a house. Or take the best deals. If you get a really good deal, don't sell it and keep it. Find a way to put a loan on it, rehab it, and then make $100,000 because you got such a good deal. So
okay. Well, Jake, it's been just shy of an hour. I got dinner that's coming up, and I'm sure you got the same thing coming on.
I got baseball.
Oh, baseball, yeah. It's been great talking to you. I look forward to possibly doing this again, or even joining you on your podcast if you ever upload the other video.
I know. I'll get there. Well, a lot of stuff going on. Which is good.
So I appreciate your time. I hope everybody enjoys. I hope you enjoyed your time, Jake. And I'll be in touch shortly. Okay?
Okay.
Thanks,
Preston. It was good talking to you.
You as well. Have a good night.
See ya.
Okay, so that was my buddy Jake doing what he does with real estate. Again, you can find him on MillionHeir, spelled with an H-E-I-R, Mafia on YouTube. He's got plenty of videos. A lot of them are instructional. A lot of them kind of goes over his experience, what he did and didn't do, lessons learned. So if you don't mind, please go check out his videos and subscribe to him. I'm sure he'd appreciate it. And with that, I'll let you guys have a good rest of your night. See you on the next one.
This has been a dose of reality from CNS Dispatch. Citizens, not servants. We now return you to your involuntary mental programming.